Hi everyone, my name's Helen Rimmer. Thanks for joining me in this art lesson about watercolour markers. These new Faber-Castell watercolour markers that have been just released last year. In your packs you'll notice that you have 4 watercolour markers, 2 brushes, and yours will be new. As you can see, mine's a little bit well loved, but yours will be new. Also, what you're going to be getting is a Strathmore visual journal with watercolor paper. So you'll have about 44 sides, so 22 sheets, 44 sides that you're going to be working with. Also, what you're going to be getting is a couple of sheets of Arches smooth hot press watercolor paper. So just for adding some highlights at the end if we need it. You'll be getting a white Posca pen and a Faber-Castell white polychromos pencil. For sketching, you'll be getting your eraser and your 2B pencil. For those who don't feel confident in drawing, you've got some little shortcuts here, some tracing sheets where you can just colour the back with graphite pencil and then trace the image onto your pages. So you'll be getting that as well. And of course, our reference photos of the images that we'll be doing in each of our 5 lessons. So this is what we'll be doing. What you need to supply yourself is a hairdryer. If you don't have a hairdryer, that's okay. You can just pause the lesson, go grab a cup of tea, and then come back when your paper's dry. What you need also is 2 containers of water, a bigger one for washing out your brush to clean out all the pigment, and another smaller container for just grabbing some nice fresh clean water. What I would actually recommend to mix your colors on when we get to that point is a white plate. So plastic, I think plastic's good too, but I actually prefer like a porcelain sort of ceramic kind of plate. I don't know, it just seems to slip on it a lot more. I think with plastic, the pigment seems to sink in a little bit. So that's what what you're going to supply yourself, and all of this is what I'm supplying for you. Okay, now to get down to the paper. So why you're getting a big journal of the Strathmore watercolor paper is because I've tested a lot of papers, and the Strathmore paper is, I think by far, and I'm shocked about this, but by far I think it's the best for actually smoothing out the watercolor in the watercolor markers. So you can see here, this is the Strathmore paper, and I'll show you an example of the the Arches, which is 100% cotton, which is, and I claim this to everyone, it is the best of the best paper. Arches is the best of the best paper, but when you draw your lines before adding water, with the Arches and other papers, it seems to leave a mark, like you can't quite scrub out those lines. So this is the cheaper version. It's not 100% cotton, and yet seems to react better than the 100% cotton. Other 100% cotton is the Stonehenge, and again, this one's a little bit better. But again, you can't quite scrub that color out or scrub out the hard lines that form. By the way, this is the blue chicken that we're all making fun of on social media. This is the Fabriano rough paper. Again, this is good, but I still found that I was getting some hard lines. This is 100% cotton as well. You can see here, a little more obvious, the Fabriano leaving the lines, and this is actually not as good as, even the Arches reacts better than this one. You can see that the Fabriano isn't quite as good. This is the Art Spectrum 60% cotton. It does some really weird things. Not a fan of this at all when it comes to the watercolor markers, but you know, it is what it is. Okay. Having said that, if you're using proper Winsor & Newton watercolors from a tube or from dry pans, I can't recommend enough the Arches paper. Hands down, it is the best watercolor paper out there, but for some reason, I don't know. With the markers, maybe it's the binding medium that's in it, I don't know. But I seem to like this Strathmore paper the best. Depends on what kind of effect you want. Okay, so getting into it, first of all, what we're going to be doing is, this is just the intro. So we're not starting any lessons yet, although this is kind of a lesson. I want you to open up to your first double page. So we'll put this sideways. I'll zoom out a bit so you can see what I'm doing. All right, and what we're going to be doing here in our book is we want to know the different colors that these 4 markers can create. So basically we're going to create a color scheme, and the more of one color and the less of another color that you add, you're going to get different variations. So we've got our 4 tones, and what we're going to be doing is we're going to be using these spirals to space out a little grid. We're going to be drawing a little grid. Okay, so first of all, we're going to grab our pencil. Oh, and also you might want a ruler as well. That might make things a bit easier for you. So first of all, we're going to divide our page this way into 3. So I'm going to go 1, 2, and 3. And up here on the top, I'm just going to put a little border. Oops. I'll put a little border there. And then here I'm going to divide crossways. I'm going to be dividing it by 2, using these spirals as a guide of how to divide it. Okay, so first of all, on this, just before the spiral begins, I'm just going to rule a little border as well. This is just where I'm going to write my text across here in these little smaller borders, these smaller columns. And then I'm going to actually draw and divide this page into 2 parts, into 2 spiral widths. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and we'll add another one, 7. So now that we've done it on this side, we're going to repeat the same thing on the other side. So we'll just draw a little border down there, divide it by 2s. So we'll just start drawing our lines across. So 2 spirals, line in between, 2 spirals, line in between. So we're going to keep doing that. And this video is going to be created in real time, so you can zoom ahead if you find yourself getting a little bit bored, but you'll be fine. Okay, and then we're going to divide it by 3 that way. So we're going to go 1, 2, and 3. Okay. Oh, that's pretty big. You might want a little bit more even than that. Okay, so first of all, we're going to write all our color combinations down here. So we can have yellow and red. We're going to do our primaries first. And then on the bottom, we're going to add our browns to these colors. So first of all, up here, we're just going to have our primary mixes and get our secondaries. Okay, so here we're going to have yellow and red, yellow and blue, and blue and red. Okay, down the bottom, we're going to have brown and yellow, brown and red, and brown and blue. So that's what we're going to be mixing across ways. Up the top, we're going to have, and we're going to write down the ratios of each color. So whatever color is first, that will be the first proportion. So we're going to have 6 parts yellow and 0 parts red. And then we're going to slowly change it as we go along. So in the next square, we're going to have 5 parts yellow and 1 part red. And then it's going to just change the same way across. So the next one, we're going to have 4 parts yellow and 2 parts red. So as we go across, the yellow is going to decrease in proportion as the red is going to increase. So the next one, we're going to have 3 parts yellow and 3 parts red. So here that's going to be an even mix between the two. And then as we go, we're going to decrease the yellow down to 2 parts, and then the red 4 parts. Next column, 1 part yellow to 5 parts red, and then right on the end, we're going to have a pure red, just as we started with a pure yellow. So we're going to have 0 parts yellow and 6 parts red. And that's going to be the same for all of the columns. And how we're going to put 6 parts of one color and 0 parts of another, we're going to be using lines. So here are our first 2. I'll turn this way and I'll zoom in. So, whoops, sorry about the little shake there. All right, so yellow and red. I'm going to be using my brush end. You'll notice that there's 2 ends to our watercolor markers. There's a brush end and then there's a bullet end. So there's the brush end and the bullet end. And I have to say, whenever you open it, when you're not using it, this is what you do. If you're not using it, you close it. You don't need it anymore. All right, we don't want our tips to dry out. So this is more for the teenagers and some adults. You know who I'm talking about. Okay, so 6 parts yellow. We're going to draw lines, just little lines. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then there's 0 parts red, so we don't need to worry about that. Across the next one, we're going to do 5 parts yellow. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then we're going to be creating 1 part red, because that's going to be the ratio of the mix. 1. Okay. How do we keep it even? It doesn't matter how long the lines are, as long as they're all the same length. That's how we're going to guarantee how we have equal proportions of each. So I'm just going to go through with all yellow first. So I'm going to do 4 lines, 3 lines, 2 and 1. So I'll do all that first. If you feel more comfortable using the bullet end, use the bullet end. There's no right or wrong here. What's important though is that all the lines are equal length to each other. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1. Okay, now on the other side, using my brush end again, we're going to 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Before we start going down with all the rest, I want you to see what's going to happen. Oh, I forgot to tell you, what you also need yourself is a box of tissues. So I'm going to grab one tissue. Why do we need tissues? Is because sometimes we have a bit too much water on our brush, so we need to get rid of some. So I'm just going to grab some clean water first, and I'm using my smaller brush, which is the size 6 round. Now, down the bottom, what I'm going to do, I'm going to pick up some water, just wipe it off the edge. And then down the bottom half, I'm going to just paint that extra water on the bottom half of that rectangle. Then I'm going to go to the top of the color, and I'm just going to mix that and dissolve that pigment, and then just drag it down into that wet area. So it's going to start darker and then become lighter. Now, I'm not going to put that in my clean water. I want to rinse it out in my dirty water container. I can clean off my brush and then just pick up some fresh water, wipe it on the edge, and then start again halfway down. Just wet that area. Why are we wetting the area down the bottom? For starters, we want to get rid of some of that water on our brush. We could actually do it on our tissue, but why waste it? We're going to wet the bottom area. So then when we start dragging the color down, we only have to drag it down a little way, and then that pigment's going to run into that watery, wet area and just become lighter on its own. So that way we get a nice gradient. So here we're just going to rub the two colors together so you can see how that line disappears straight away. And we're just going to drag it down. And you can see how it's quite an orange color. So rinse out my brush again in the dirty water, and then pick up some, I didn't wipe it, but that's okay. I'm going to pick it up in the clean area. Bottom half wet, start from the top, and then drag it down. Okay. So, and I'm tempted to go in and just mix that a little bit more. Don't. Trust me, don't. You'll just stuff it up. Just go with what's there. It's all right. At the end of the day, you're not going to see it. And I know what it's like. So everything that you're feeling, I feel it too, or I felt it too. So I'm going to get rid of the extra water, but I still want my brush to be wet. And then I'm just going to wet the bottom and then mix that and then drag it down. And like if you have more water on your brush, then your pigment is going to be lighter. So you can see that's quite a cool red. It's very much a bluey red, but here it's starting to look more like a warmer yellowy red there, or an orangey red. So you can get a warm and a cool red for people who understand that concept. Don't worry if you don't. If you don't understand about cools and warms, don't worry about it. What you need to know is that's a kind of like a bluer red, a bit more of a purpley red, and that's a more of an orangey red. Just think of it in that sense. Okay, so here, so you can see here we're heading it, so that's an even split between your yellow and your red. Here we're starting to get a little bit more red heavy. So I'll mix these two together. We're just going to drag that down. And yeah, you can see instant change. And probably because I didn't, okay, you know what? I am going to go in and mix it more because I need to pick up a bit more of that yellow. All right. Oh, I flicked that one. That could very well have stuffed up. Okay, grab some clean water. Always clean it in your dirty water. Because what can happen, why we need to do that, is because when your water becomes so dirty, that dirty water then starts to affect the color. Oops, I don't want to do that. So mix it together and then drag it down. So it starts affecting the color, and it can influence, like if I had green, if this water was really green, it would start making this red look a bit more brown. So that's why we always need to clean out our brush first and then get some fresh water on from another container. If you find your water's dirty, just change it over, get some fresh water. And this is just the pure red. So you can see that's quite a bluey, pinky, like it's more of a pink. If it's more of a pink red, that means it's a cool red. So it has blue in it. Okay, so there you can see from 2 colors, we've got this whole spectrum of oranges and reds and pinks. So even down here, this cool lighter area, that's more of a pink. So you've got from 2 colors, 2 colors. You've got like this wider range. Okay, here we're going to be starting to use, next column, we're going to be using our yellow and our blue. Yellow is our first color, blue is our second color. So the first ratio is going to be, or portion, just think of it as cooking. We use 6 parts yellow, 0 parts blue, and then we just keep changing it along the way. All right, so if you feel confident, you can just zoom ahead and do it. Okay, yellow, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, and 1. Just remember, in each column, your lines have to be equal length. That way you'll get the proportions right. And if you're using the brush end, then use the brush end for the whole column. Like you can swap it over here, you can just use the bullet in this one, but as long as you're using the same thing, same end, same length in each square or rectangle, then you're going to get your proportions right. Oops, just make that a bit longer. 2 here, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Oops, that was a bit longer. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And again, this is going to be more obvious. So rinse out your brush. Oops. Grab some clean water and then get rid of the excess just off the side. Wetting the bottom. So we wet the bottom because we want the color to run down the bottom. Okay, so we've already seen what the yellow looks like up here, but that's okay, we'll just do it again. Drag that down, rinse it out first. In your dirty water, pick up your water, clean water from your clean section. Color the bottom down first. Mix the 2 together and then just drag it down into your wet paper. Rinse it out. See what a limey green you have there? It is a lovely green. And you're going to end up, like here, you're going to see how you're going to end up with some beautiful grass greens and then some great, almost like really dark tree greens. Even here already, you can see the change between the greens. And what a range of greens you're going to get. Again, just from 2 colors, from mixing different proportions. When you are mixing colors, always start with your lighter tone and then slowly add your darker tone. So in the case of your yellow and red, you would start by, oh, see, I'm doing it. I stuffed it. I've mucked it up a little bit. That's all right. See what happens when you go over it. We all do it. That's all right. It's tempting. There's that little voice in your head that says, just fix it up. It's all right. We all do it. All of us. We can't leave it alone. All right, and dragging that down. Grab some fresh water. So for the yellow and the blue, we want to start with our yellow because it's a very light tone compared to our blue when we're mixing colors. Unless we know we want a really dark green, then you can start with your dark blue, your blue. And with our red and yellow, like I said, we start with our yellow and then slowly add, especially if we want to mix orange, we always start with our yellow and then slowly add our red. When it comes to purple though, because those two colors, red and blue, they're kind of like the same tone, they're the same darkness. If I put these colors through a photocopier, you would see these would be very light grays. Coming up here, these two would be a similar, like the red and the blue, they would be a similar gray. So that means they're the same or similar tone. So when you're mixing a purple, you can actually use equal parts, red and blue, to mix to get straight away into that even purple, that middle purple. Now here on this row, we're gonna actually be using our blue and red. So we're gonna be starting with our blue. So we're gonna be starting with 6 lines of blue all the way to 6 lines of red up here. And we're actually gonna see the different purples that we're gonna get. We're gonna see how we can get the reddy purples over to those bluey purples. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, and 1 over 2. That's 0 there. 1 line. 1, 2. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and last of all, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. For any teenagers who are doing this, or anyone who hated maths at school, you hated ratios. This is why we need our ratios. We need ratios in art, cooking, pretty much anything in life. So again, clean water, clean brush, paint the bottom, and we're just going to start with that blue and drag it down, rinse it out, grab some fresh water and paint the bottom, mix the two together and see how with this paper, like I said, I have no idea why. Look how that's quite a pinky purple there. Oh no, actually that's quite a bluey purple. What am I talking about? It's quite a bluey purple there. So yeah, this isn't, theoretically, this paper shouldn't work as well as, oh, got too much water there. This paper shouldn't work as well as the Arches, but in this respect, with these markers, for some reason, it seems to manipulate and dissolve these markers better on this paper. I don't know why. So mixing these two colours, and yeah, here you can see as we're getting more of a ratio of red and less of a ratio of blue, we're going to get more of a pinky purple rather than this bluey purple that's over here. So I'm going to mix these two together, drag it down. There we go. Don't know if you can hear the kids outside. All right. Our last mix here before we get into the pure red. So you can see that's a very pinky So if that's not pink enough, you can always just add a touch of blue to it and you'll get a really beautiful pink. And then here, we'll use our red. Oh, I forgot to wet the bottom. See that? No, I got distracted by the kids. Oh well, c'est la vie. All right, now we're gonna get into the browns down the bottom. Look how many colors we have with just these three. Oh my goodness, see? And now we're gonna see what we can create with when we start adding brown. And here's a little spoiler alert. We're gonna actually create grays and black with these two when we start mixing these two. So you'll see that happening. All right, let's move this up. And we will start again. 6 parts of brown going all the way to even Stevens in the middle, 3 parts of each, and then we're going to end up with just 6 parts of yellow on the other end. So starting with our brown, because that's the first color we wrote here, so that's the first color we're going to be putting down. So 6 lines. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Next one's only going to be 5 parts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, and 1. And you know what? While I've got the brown, I might just start doing all these ones again. So we're going to go 6 down the bottom. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, and 1, and down again. Brown and blue. Starting with brown. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. I have to keep looking at the top of the sheet. I keep forgetting what I'm doing. And all right, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, and 1. Okay, so the top one is yellow. So we're going to be starting with, careful not to lean on it because you might actually pick it up and then end up stamping it all over your book. So just from far away, we're going to be leaving this all alone. That's just the brown. Over here, just 1 line, 1, and then 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yep. I had to think about that one. I had to look up the top where I've actually written my ratios. I had to look up the top. So just keep looking up the top, making sure that you get it right. And okay, that's 5. And oh, is that 5? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yep. And 6 here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So the next one's red. You know what you could do as well? You could even start doing combinations. So you could even, on the next page, you could start seeing what happens when you mix 3 colors. Oh, well, I'm not going to go that far. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And last one is blue. So that one, leave it alone. Next one is 1, then 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay, so again, starting with some clean water, wiping the edge, getting rid of the excess. We're going to wet the bottom and then dissolve up the top and then drag it down. rinse this out. We don't want to be going to the next one with a dirty brush, even though you think, oh, but it's brown. But the extra brown pigment in your brush will add to the ratio proportion of the next one. So that's why you want it clean after every one, because you don't want to be adding more of each color into the next lot. So you might be a little bit painful and fiddly, but if you want a true result, you do need to wash in between each one. So wash in the dirty section, pick up water from the clean pot, wipe the excess water off, wet the bottom, start at the top and start mixing it down. And look, we're actually getting sort of like this yellowy brown. It's almost like turning into like a raw sienna. So here's a little trick with the, if you start doing 3 colors, and when I talk about 3 colors, like even using these middle or some of these secondary colors, you might, I'm just going to mix this together, bring it down. I can actually make a yellow ochre with purple and yellow. Like, what if you started mixing proportions of these 3 all together? You're going to end up with some more colors, more earthy colors. You'll be surprised. So if you are COVID bored, I mean, what else are you going to do with your time? In Australia, we're too lazy to loot. Just kidding, no looting. No one loots in Australia. Okay, mixing these 2 together, dragging it down so we get a nice lighter version. The reason why we don't loot in Australia is because we're too busy having barbecues. Okay, clean, adding water down the bottom. And then we just got our pure yellow there and just dragging that down. So we can see how we've got some light browny brown and it's starting to become that yellowy brown. So that's a nice color. You'll notice that when we start doing our rainbow lorikeets, underneath the tail, there will be some of this color happening. So that's something to keep, store away. Okay, so this is just your brown again. Rinse that one out. Grab some fresh water. Wipe away the excess. You don't want too much water on your brush because it'll just pull and just flood the paper. Oh, look at that nice reddy brown. Even just that little line of red has added a beautiful burnt sienna look to that dark sepia. So the original color that I've given you is dark sepia, but now I've actually created sort of like, where's that Van Dyke brown? I don't know, but it's that kind of red brown. And then I'm gonna wet the bottom and then mix the 2 colors together and drag it down. And now we're almost going to start getting into an Indian red, where it's that really dark browny red color. So we really got some beautiful colors that are happening. So get rid of the excess water, but we don't want it like a dry brush. So we do need some water on our brush, and I'm just going to drag it down. Oh, that's a lovely color. That's beautiful. I love that. Okay. So just wiping the edge. Wet the bottom, mix the two together. And isn't that amazing how we really, like this paper, I can't get over it. This paper just does not leave any lines. The downside of this paper is that every time you go over it with water though, and a new color, it does easily activate down the bottom. Look at that, I've actually put a little drop there by accident. See how it's activating it again? So that's the downside of using this paper. But in our 5 lessons, we will be using the Arches paper as well. So you will see how that reacts. Oops. Okay, let's get over and we can see, yeah, red's just red. We've seen that up the top. And drag it down. That is a nice cool red. And also watercolors like these markers, just like every other watercolor, will actually dry lighter. And the more water you add to the paint will actually lighten the color. So that's something you've got to think about. As you can see, the more water, because we've wet the bottom, it becomes a lighter color. So here we're going to actually start creating some really nice grays down the bottom. Blue and brown, they make gray. So make sure you mix the two together. So we're actually getting a darker brown now, slightly darker. And if you scrub this paper too much with your brush, you can actually see that the paper does roll a bit. So you can actually scrub the surface of the paper and you'll get like little pulp sort of coming off. So yeah, now we're starting to get into a darker brown. We're in the even split of brown to blue. So 3 parts brown, 3 parts blue, even Stevens. Wet the bottom. I'm going to mix this together and then drag it down. You can see that's quite black or close to black. And now we're going to get into more of a bluey black. So if you like that bluey black look, you can see how it's created here. Well, that's a lovely bluey black. Oh, see, that's my favorite color right there. It's that bluey black. It's almost like that Payne's Gray color, that bluey black color. All right, now we're gonna have a really dark blue, but also it's kind of like a grayish blue. So you can see how it's only got 1 part brown in there to your 5 parts blue. So even just adding that tiny bit of brown will gray out your blue and sort of mute that color. And another way to do that is by adding a touch of orange. So if I had this blue and I had a small touch of orange to it, that would gray out that blue as well. Because it's when you add your complementary color to your primary color, then you actually kind of mute it or gray it out. All right, so that's the whole thing done. And why does orange and brown work to gray out blue? Because brown is kind of like a derivative of and within the spectrum of your oranges. Okay, so if that makes sense. Does it? Does it make sense? Who knows? Anyway, so here we have a whole spectrum. Before we start all our lessons, this is just the intro, but before we start, you can see that we have a whole range of colors that we can use. So here we're just going to take, I'm just going to take you through a couple of little techniques and with the, or how the marker pens are used. just to draw a quick circle. So you can actually, and I'll draw a few circles here. And be a good idea just to play, use a page just to play with your different markers. So using the blue, I like the brush tip. So I'm just gonna do a half moon. And then what I'm going to do with the water in the brush, grab some clean water. I'll take away some of the excess. And I'm actually just going to run my brush over the marker, activate it, and then pull it into the center. So you can see it's there's a lot of pooling water. It's like quite a puddle there. So I probably had I had too much water on my brush. So the next time, and you can actually see there's a bit of a cauliflowering effect happening here because there was a lot of water there, and now that it's sitting there, it's actually starting to push back into the color. So that was too much water. But going to the next way of how you might be able to use these watercolor markers, you can actually even just wet the area as if you don't want it too dark, the color. So now that that area is wet, I can actually go in and draw in that circle, and you can actually see because it's wet in there, the color is touching that wet paper and it's bleeding into that wet area. So you can see that's another way you can use these watercolor markers, even drawing on the wet area. You can see it depends, and it does dry pretty quickly, so you do have to work fast. But you can see as it was drying, well, actually that might have been a dry area there. I might not have wet the paper properly there, but you can see as I've been drawing, the paper's wet, so the pigment will go into the paper and then just spread. So that's another way you can do it. Another way is, you can see I've got this plate here, which I've used for the next lesson. So I'm actually backtracking on this one, but I can actually draw on my palette, on my little paint palette, which is what I'm calling this plate, my plate palette. So I've got the blue, the yellow, and a bit of red. And I can actually use them like normal watercolors. So I'm going to use my smaller brush, grab some water. I'll pick up some yellow, pop some yellow on, rinse out my brush. I'll pick up some red. There's a lot of water on that, so I'll take off some of the water there. I'm just going to put that red next to the yellow. Rinse out my brush. Grab some more fresh water. I might take some of the water off my brush there, and I'm just going to use that blue, pick up that blue, and then I can put the blue next to that red, and maybe even a little bit over it, have a bit of a mix. So you can see you can actually pop your colours next to each other and use them like normal watercolours. I'm actually going to go right around and see what happens when I do this. Okay, I can't help myself. I like playing with these watercolours. So you can see, you can even create little mixes where I've had red and blue next to each other there, and I've already mixed a purple. And just like watercolours, this has been here for a few days, I can actually reactivate that pigment that's on the plate, which is dried already, and I can put it on my paper. So you don't really ever want to throw it away. More water, this is another thing to know with watercolors. The more water you have on the brush, the lighter the tone. So I can wash out my brush completely, grab some fresh water, wet it down the bottom, and then back down and let that color drag down. Things we will talk about in the lessons is cauliflowering. So you can see this is cauliflowered. Now I'm going to do it quite obviously here. And so I'm going to do it deliberately and in a really obvious way here. So I'm actually going to put a lot of pigment down. And I'm going to use the larger of the two brushes. So I've got the larger of the two brushes. I might take a bit of the water away. So I'm just going to touch my tissue, just take away a bit of the water. And I'm going to start in a blank end, move up into the pigment and then just drag it down. So that's there. Now that's quite wet. And because it's wet, the pigment hasn't set properly into the paper. So it can reactivate really quickly. Reactivating means re-wetting and moving the paint. So now it's still wet. If I grab some water, and this is something you have to watch. If you have too much water on your brush and there's like a big drip on that one, if I just put that on my wet paint there, you can see how that water, think of it as water displacement. If you get in the bath, your body goes into the bathtub and then it just pushes all the water out of the way. So the same thing happens with the paint and the pigment. So if I put a big blob of water, think of that as your body, and then that's just gonna push that water is gonna push all that pigment aside to make room for that water. So that's cauliflowering. So that's why sometimes we have to be careful. We have to make sure that that shine is gone. So that there was just too much water. We have to watch when we have too much water on our brushes. We have to watch out when it's still wet, the paper. It's a good idea to dry areas, even with a hairdryer. So here we are again, that's still wet. There's some other things I will talk about, like priming your brush. So sometimes if I want an area to stay quite dark, like if I put down some pigment, and I'll do that there, and then I'll do another example over here. So I'll do the same thing over here. And in the first one, I'm just going to wash a clean brush, so brush with just water. I'm going to just wash that over those two lines. So I'm just going to wash it across. So you can see, and even here, I'll do a third time. So you can see that's quite, that's really started to lighten, pull that color away and lighten it. Now, if I prime my brush, so I've already got blue on it, and if I grab some more blue here, this is actually purple, but that's okay. So if I grab more color, you can actually get quite a darker color here. And that's dry, that's pretty dry, that brush, so I'm going to grab a tiny bit of water there. So now that you can actually see the color on there. If I actually go over these two lines now, you can see it stays. I've actually primed this brush where it won't pick up as much color. Like it is picking it up because you can see it's moved over here, but it won't lighten the whole area. Like because there's already pigment on there, it's making everything around it darker, and so it's keeping this area dark as well. So that's when I'm talking about priming the brush, making sure there's color on this, whatever color we're using in this area, and I'm putting it on. Different ways of taking water off your brush. You can actually, depends on how much water you want to take off. You can either just wipe it on the side of your water container, or you can actually, if you really want to take a lot of water off, you can just touch the tissue. And you can see, I don't know if you saw that, but that water just, as soon as I touched the tissue, that just went straight into the tissue. So as soon as that brush touched the tissue, that water just soaked into the tissue. Other ways to get colour off, like you can see that's still moving. So I'll grab a clean bit of tissue and I can actually just dab that area while it's wet. And if it's wet, it'll work. Ooh, look at that, it went blue. What happened? Oh, that's interesting. I mean, it went pink. So it's picked up a bit of pink there. Must be some underlying colour in there. Okay, so, or is it from the other side? Who knows, I doubt it. No. So you can see I've picked up, just because it's wet, I've taken it away. Because it was already wet, I was able to take all that colour away. Here is quite dry, that's dry now. So if I actually, and it's lighter, but if I actually wet that area and then use a clean part of the tissue to just dab it, don't scrub, but just dab, you can see I have taken a little bit off, but I haven't taken as much because that pigment actually has sunk into the paper and set. I can scrub some of that colour away, like with the lighter tones, like over here it's darker, but with these lighter tones I can actually use the colour, the brush. I can actually use the brush and just scrub away. When I talk about scrubbing, I'm very lightly running my brush over the paper. And then with the tissue, I can just dab that away. So I can actually lift some of the colour. And over here, I can actually clean that edge, dab it again, and that cleans that quite well. Different ways of mixing colour. You can actually put them, you can actually pick up colour by putting it on your brush. So I can put some colour on the plate and then using my marker, I can actually pick up that colour and then create the purple there. Another way of doing it, and just as you use it more, as you use the brush, it will just disappear. So you can actually create a bit of a gradient effect, which I can then use my brush, take away some of the water, and I can just drag it across, create like a purple to a blue. Another way, and I'll use the yellow and the red for this, you can actually put the colour directly onto the markers. So I can actually touch the end. If I wanted to do a gradient, you can see some of that red is going on the yellow tip of the marker. And just starting here, I can just start with that orange and just keep going across, just as I did with the purple and the red. You can see that's just disappearing. And you do have to kind of work it a bit, especially it's going to be really obvious with the red and the yellow that the red is staying on the tip. If you want to get rid of it, you can actually wipe it on your plate till it goes, or even just using a tissue just to take that colour off the tip and clean it up. Again, I can use a water brush. Oh, look, a little splotch of water. I can use this water brush just to, brush was too dry, just to glide that colour across from orange to yellow. How to lift colour off as well, by using the tip of your brush. If you want to take a fine line out. So I've got a clean brush here, and I want to take a really thin line out of there. So I'm going to pick up some water and I'm just going to touch this tissue with my brush, and I'm going to twist it at the same time just so it keeps a fine point. There we go, it's a nice fine point there. I don't want too much water because that water will travel down the bristle and just flood that area. So I don't want too much water on my brush. In fact, I just want to make sure that it's not going to keep bleeding. But at the same time, I don't want to actually wipe the brush with the tissue. So now just using the absolute tip of this brush, I'm just going to go back and forth in a line. Very careful, just using the absolute tip. And I'm going to find a clean side of the tissue and just press. And you can see I can pull a line out there. I've also given you some shortcuts in the Posca pen, which is this, and also the polychromos pencil. So you don't even have to use this technique if you're unsure about it. If it kind of scares you, that's okay. We're all at different stages. You can always just use a white pencil. Make sure it's, oh geez. Make sure everything is absolutely dry first. So you want to make sure that everything is dry. I might go to a different area. So you can see with the colored pencil, with my white pencil, this is absolutely dry and I can just lighten the area. With the white pencil, it won't become pure white. So depending on how hard I press, if I press lighter, I can just get more of a pale white over it. If I press harder, you can see I'm going to get a more intense white, but still not going to be a really, like a strong white area. If I really wanted a really strong white line, that's when I would use the Posca pen. Using the Posca pen, always keep the lid on when you're shaking it, getting it ready, and then you can just draw your little line. So you can see here that line is really white because that's actually a white acrylic that's coming out onto the page there. So the instructions on how to get your Posca pen started are all here. Don't be afraid to push the marker down to get it, oh, I just stabbed myself. To push it all the way down. There we go. See how it goes, pushes all the way down. So that's gonna help get that flow of white paint happening. So you can see this is where I colored it in with white pencil, but now I'm going over it with some white Posca pen. So if you're not confident, and see how I can even like just dab it with a tissue just to soften that white as well. So I will take you through techniques on how to take out color, how to create white areas. If you are unsure and you just want to play a little bit safe, you're more than welcome to use your white pencil as highlights and also this, but use them right at the very end. Right at the very end, like finish the artwork, then you can add some highlights. Because if you then try and put some watercolor on top of the white polychromos pencil and the Posca pen, it's not really going to work. So I hope that will get you started. Enjoy these markers, and I hope you enjoy these lessons. So I just want you to know that our first lesson is blueberries. And if you're worried, trust me, that's the final one that we're going to do. But I did it quite a few times just to work out how, that's our third lesson, I mean our second lesson, don't worry about that. But I did it quite a few times to work out exactly how I was going to teach you. So don't worry, have fun. We're going to have an awesome time.